The mansion glowed like a jewel box against the evening sky. Every window sparkled with crystal chandeliers, and luxury cars lined the circular driveway like a parade of wealth. Inside, men in tailored suits and women in designer gowns sipped champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's weekly groceries. Vincent Park stood near the grand staircase, holding court with a small group of admirers. At 42, he'd made his fortune in tech startups and never let anyone forget it. His watch alone could have paid for a year of college tuition. Tonight's charity gala was his creation, held at his estate, and he made sure everyone knew it. The trick to success, Vincent said, gesturing with his champagne glass, is knowing when to pivot. Most people stay stuck in their comfort zones their entire lives. That's why they stay ordinary. His guests nodded and laughed at the appropriate moments. They always did. In the kitchen, the catering staff moved with practiced efficiency. Trays of appetizers flowed out while dirty dishes flowed in. Among the servers was Daniel Rodriguez, dressed in the standard black vest and bow tie that all the temporary staff wore. At 38, his face carried lines that spoke of hard years, but his movements were careful and professional. "Table 6 needs more of those little crab things," another server whispered as she rushed past. Daniel nodded and picked up a fresh tray. His hands were rough, the kind that came from real work, not gym workouts. As he moved through the crowd, most guests barely glanced at him. To them, he was just part of the background, like the furniture or the paintings on the walls. He'd been working 3 jobs for the past year. Catering paid the best hourly rate, even if the work was unpredictable. His daughter Lily was 9 now, and she needed things: school supplies, decent shoes, a winter coat that actually fit. The money from his disability check helped, but it wasn't enough. It was never quite enough. "Excuse me," Daniel said softly, offering the tray to a woman dripping in pearls. She took an appetizer without looking at him, continuing her conversation about her recent trip to the south of France. Daniel's left hand trembled slightly as he held the tray. It always did when he was tired. The nerve damage made sure of that. He'd learned to compensate, to work around it, but by the end of a long shift, his body reminded him of what he'd lost. "More champagne over here," Vincent's voice carried across the room. Daniel set down his tray and picked up a bottle from the bar. As he approached Vincent's group, he caught fragments of their conversation. "I just don't understand people who settle," a man in a gray suit was saying. "If you're not constantly pushing yourself, what's the point?" "Exactly," Vincent agreed. "I always tell my employees, if you're comfortable, you're dying. That's why I wake up at 5 every morning. That's why I'm always looking for the next opportunity." Daniel poured champagne into the extended glasses, keeping his eyes down. He'd learned that was easier. Don't engage. Don't make eye contact. Just do the job and collect the paycheck. But as he poured Vincent's glass, his sleeve rode up slightly, revealing the edge of a tattoo on his forearm. "Hold on," Vincent said, grabbing Daniel's wrist. "What's that?" Daniel stiffened. "Just a tattoo, sir. Let me see it." It wasn't a request. Daniel set down the champagne bottle and reluctantly rolled up his sleeve. The tattoo was intricate, covering most of his forearm. Military insignia, dates, names of brothers he'd served with, and woven through it all something unusual. Measures of musical notation perfectly rendered in black ink. "Military, huh?" Vincent said, his tone shifting. "Let me guess. Peaked in your 20s? Saw some action? Came home expecting the world to owe you something?" The group around him went quiet. A few people looked uncomfortable, but no one said anything. "Just served my country, sir," Daniel said evenly, trying to pull his arm back. Vincent held on a moment longer, studying the tattoo. "What's with the music notes? Thought you were supposed to be tough guys. This some kind of sensitive artist thing?" A few nervous laughs rippled through the group. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "I should get back to work, sir." Wait, Vincent said, releasing his arm but warming to his new entertainment. "You play music? That's actually perfect timing." He turned to address the entire room, raising his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention." The conversations died down. All eyes turned to Vincent and the uncomfortable-looking server beside him. "As you all know," Vincent continued, "I recently acquired something rather special." He gestured toward the far corner of the room, where a magnificent grand piano sat like a throne. Its polished black surface gleamed under the chandelier light. "That's a Steinway Model D. Cost more than most people's houses. It's a piece of art, really. Most people wouldn't even know how to appreciate it. Daniel's eyes fixed on the piano. He hadn't let himself look at it directly all evening. It was easier that way. "I've been trying to get someone to play it tonight," Vincent went on, "but apparently, despite all the wealth in this room, we're lacking in talent. So imagine my surprise when I discover our server here has some kind of musical background." He turned to Daniel with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What do you say? Want to give us a little show? Play something for the crowd?" "I don't think that's appropriate, sir," Daniel said quietly. "Oh, come on," Vincent pressed. "Don't be modest. You've got music tattooed on your arm. You must be passionate about it, right? Here's your chance to play an instrument worth more than you'll make in 5 years." The room was completely silent now. Daniel could feel dozens of eyes on him. His face burned, but he kept his expression neutral. "I'm working, sir. I insist," Vincent cut him off. "Really, it's my party, my piano, and I'm asking. Consider it a break. You do get breaks, right?" Someone in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. A woman in a blue dress whispered something to her companion. Daniel's hands curled into fists at his sides, then relaxed. He thought about Lily at home with the babysitter. He thought about the rent due next week. He thought about all the reasons he couldn't afford to walk out or make a scene. "I can play a little," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Wonderful." Vincent clapped his hands together. "Everyone, let's give our talented server some space. This should be interesting." The crowd parted as Daniel walked toward the piano. Each step felt like walking through water. He hadn't played on anything this beautiful in more than a decade. Hadn't played for an audience in even longer. He reached the piano and stood there for a moment, his damaged left hand hanging at his side. The room waited. Vincent leaned against a column, arms crossed, wearing an expression of amused anticipation. Daniel pulled out the bench and sat down. He flexed his fingers, feeling the familiar ache in his left hand. The piano was perfectly in tune. He could tell without playing a single note. He closed his eyes and let his hands find the keys, and then he began to play. The first notes fell into the silence like drops of water into a still pond, soft, gentle, almost hesitant. Daniel's right hand carried the melody while his left provided harmony, compensating for the weakness with careful placement. The piece started simple, almost like a lullaby, and for a moment Vincent's smirk deepened. This was what he'd expected. Basic, amateur. But then something shifted. The melody began to grow, climbing and falling in ways that felt both unexpected and inevitable. Daniel's eyes remained closed, his face peaceful as if he'd forgotten the room full of people watching him. His hands moved across the keys with a confidence that contradicted his worn appearance and trembling left hand. The music changed again, darker now. Minor chords crept in, telling a story without words. It spoke of loss and distance, of things broken that couldn't be put back together. A woman near the front row felt tears prick her eyes, though she couldn't say why. Vincent's smile faded. He straightened up from the column, his arms uncrossing. This wasn't what he'd expected at all. The piece built in intensity. Daniel's damaged left hand struggled with some of the faster passages, but he'd written the music to work around his limitations. What might have been weakness became part of the story. The hesitations, the pauses, the way certain notes held longer than expected. It all felt intentional, purposeful. The room was completely still except for the music. No one sipped champagne. No one checked their phones. A man in the back who'd been ready to leave early found himself rooted to the spot, his coat draped over his arm, forgotten. The melody shifted again, and now there was hope in it. Not the cheap, easy kind of hope, but something harder won. It climbed upward like someone learning to walk again after an injury. Stumbling but persistent, the harmonies supported it, lifted it, until the whole piece seemed to glow with quiet determination. Daniel's face remained serene, but a single tear traced down his cheek. His hands knew this music like they knew breathing. He'd composed it during the darkest period of his life, when Lily was 3 and he'd just lost his wife, when the medical bills were stacking up and his hand was still wrapped in bandages. When he'd wondered if anything good would ever happen again, he'd written it in his head first, like he wrote all his music now. No piano needed, just the notation running through his thoughts while he washed dishes or drove to his next job. Later, he'd scratch it out on paper during Lily's nap times, one measure at a time. This was the first time he'd ever played it on an instrument this magnificent. The Steinway responded to every touch, every subtle shift in pressure. It sang the way pianos were meant to sing, and for these few minutes, Daniel forgot about everything else. The sneering rich man, the uncomfortable audience, the fact that he was wearing a server's uniform at someone else's party. There was only the music. The piece reached its climax, a cascade of notes that somehow sounded like both an ending and a beginning. Then it began to settle like leaves falling after wind. The melody returned to something close to where it started, but transformed, changed by the journey. The final chord hung in the air, and Daniel held the sustain pedal down, letting it fade naturally into silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. Daniel opened his eyes slowly, as if waking from a dream. He looked at his hands on the keys, then carefully lifted them and placed them in his lap. His left hand was shaking more now. He'd pushed it hard. The silence stretched. Then someone started clapping. It was the woman in the blue dress who'd whispered earlier. Her applause was followed by another person, then another, until the entire room erupted. People weren't just clapping politely. They were on their feet, some with tears streaming down their faces, applauding like they'd just witnessed something they'd never forget. Daniel stood up quickly, overwhelmed, his face flushed. He wasn't used to this anymore. Hadn't been for years. "Thank you," he said quietly, but his voice was lost in the applause. Vincent stood frozen, his expression unreadable. His mouth was slightly open, his earlier smugness completely gone. An older woman pushed through the crowd, moving with purpose. She was in her 60s, elegant in a simple black dress with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Excuse me," she said, reaching Daniel. "Excuse me, please." The applause began to die down as people sensed something significant was happening. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, thinking he'd done something wrong. "I should get back to that piece," the woman interrupted, her voice shaking. "That was after the storm, wasn't it?" Daniel froze. His face went pale. "I'm sorry, who—" "My name is Catherine Webb," the woman said. "I teach at the conservatory downtown. I've been teaching there for 34 years. She paused, studying his face. "And unless I'm very much mistaken, you're Daniel Rodriguez." The room went completely silent again. Daniel's throat worked, but no sound came out at first. Finally, he managed. "That was a long time ago. 15 years, Catherine said. 15 years since you left Juilliard. We thought—" She stopped, collecting herself. "We thought you were gone, lost to us. Your professors used to talk about you, said you were one of the most gifted composers they'd seen in a generation." Someone in the crowd gasped. Several people pulled out their phones, clearly searching the name. "I don't do that anymore," Daniel said quietly, looking at the floor. "Don't do it?" Catherine's voice rose with emotion. "You just played an original composition that most concert pianists would sell their souls to perform. You just moved a room full of people to tears. How can you say you don't do this anymore?" "It's complicated," Daniel said. Vincent finally found his voice. "Wait, you went to Juilliard? You're a professional musician?" Daniel's jaw tightened. Was past tense. "But the tattoo," Vincent continued, confusion clear on his face. "You're military. How does someone go from Juilliard to—" He gestured vaguely at Daniel's server uniform. Catherine turned to Vincent with a look that could have frozen fire. "Young man, have you considered that perhaps the world is more complicated than your understanding of it?" Vincent stepped back, chastened. "Daniel," Catherine said, turning back to him gently. "What happened?" Everyone at the conservatory wondered. "You were there one semester, brilliant and rising, and then you were just gone. No graduation, no forwarding information." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. The whole room waited. Finally he spoke, his voice steady but soft. "September 11th happened," he said simply. "I watched the towers fall on a TV in the student lounge. 3 days later I enlisted." More gasps from the crowd. "My professors told me I was throwing my life away," Daniel continued. "Said I could serve my country better through my art than through combat. Maybe they were right. I don't know." He held up his left hand, letting them see the scars that ran along the palm and up the wrist. "IED in Fallujah. Killed 2 of my friends. Shredded the nerves in my hand. Ended my performance career before I turned 25. The room was absolutely silent now. Even the catering staff had stopped moving in the kitchen. "I'm sorry," Vincent said quietly. The smugness was completely gone from his voice. I didn't know, Daniel cut him off. You didn't know. Most people don't. He looked around at all the faces watching him. I should really get back to work now. Wait, Catherine said, reaching out to touch his arm. Please, we need to talk. Daniel shook his head. There's nothing to talk about. That part of my life is over. But you're still composing, Catherine insisted. That piece was new. I would have recognized it otherwise. You're still creating. In my head, yeah, Daniel said with a bitter smile, while I'm serving appetizers or stocking shelves at the warehouse. Great use of a Juilliard education, right? The catering manager appeared at the edge of the room looking stressed. She caught Daniel's eye and tapped her watch. They were behind schedule. I really need to go, Daniel said. Catherine pulled a business card from her clutch and pressed it into his hand. Please, call me tomorrow, this week, anytime. Daniel pocketed the card without looking at it and headed back toward the kitchen. The crowd parted for him, their expressions changed. No longer invisible, he was now uncomfortably visible. Some looked at him with pity, others with curiosity, a few with genuine admiration. He preferred being invisible. In the kitchen, the other servers were buzzing with whispered conversations that stopped when he entered. Daniel grabbed his tray and got back to work, but everything felt different now. Guests he'd served earlier in the evening now tried to make eye contact, to smile at him, to say thank you like they really meant it. It made his skin crawl. When the event finally ended around 11, Daniel helped break down the service stations and pack up the equipment. The catering manager approached him as he was loading boxes into the van. That was something, she said. You're full of surprises, Rodriguez. Just trying to do my job, Daniel muttered. Well, you made an impression. Mr. Park left a personal tip for you. She handed him an envelope. Daniel opened it and found $500 bills inside. His stomach churned. Guilt money. The rich man's way of feeling better about himself. He thought about refusing it. His pride told him to refuse it. But then he thought about Lily's dental appointment next month that insurance wouldn't fully cover. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. Thanks, he said, pocketing the envelope. The drive home took 40 minutes. Daniel lived in a modest apartment complex on the other side of town, the kind with peeling paint and a parking lot full of old cars. But the rent was manageable, and the school district was decent. That's what mattered. He parked and climbed the stairs to the second floor. Inside apartment 2C, Mrs. Chen from next door was watching television with the volume low. She looked up when he entered. How was work? She asked in her gentle, accented English. Long, Daniel said. How was Lily? Perfect angel, like always. Did homework, practiced piano for 30 minutes, ate her dinner. In bed by 8:30? Daniel pulled out his wallet, but Mrs. Chen waved him off. No. You helped my grandson with his college essay. We're even. They went through this ritual every time. Daniel insisted on paying. Mrs. Chen insisted they were neighbors helping neighbors. Usually she won. After she left, Daniel checked on Lily. She was asleep, her dark hair spread across the pillow, one arm hanging off the bed. Her room was small but neat. A keyboard sat in the corner. Not a real piano, but the best he could afford. Drawings she'd made covered one wall. Most were of the two of them together. Daniel pulled her blanket up and kissed her forehead. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. In his own room, Daniel changed out of his work clothes and sat on the edge of his bed. The envelope of tip money sat on the dresser, along with Catherine's business card. He picked up the card and read it. Catherine Webb, Professor of Composition. Riverside Conservatory of Music. He turned it over. On the back she'd written a phone number and a note in neat handwriting. The world needs your music. Please don't let pride rob us of it. Daniel set the card down and lay back on the bed staring at the ceiling. His left hand throbbed. He'd pushed it too hard tonight, asked too much of it. Tomorrow it would be worse, but it had been worth it. For those few minutes at that piano, he'd remembered who he used to be, who he might have become. Sleep didn't come easily. His mind replayed the evening. Vincent's mocking face, the feel of that perfect piano under his fingers, the shock in the room when Catherine recognized his name, the weight of all those eyes on him. He finally drifted off around 2 in the morning and woke to his alarm at 6. Lily had school, and he had a shift at the warehouse starting at 8. Over breakfast, Lily chattered about her day ahead. She had a spelling test and was nervous about it. Daniel helped her practice words while she ate her cereal. How was your job last night? She asked between bites. It was fine, sweetie. Did you have to serve fancy people? Very fancy people. Did they have a piano? Daniel paused. Lily knew he used to play, but he didn't talk about it much. She'd never seen him perform. They did, actually. Did you play it? Her eyes lit up. I did, just for a few minutes. I wish I could have heard it, Lily said wistfully. You never play anymore. Just teach me. That's because you're better than me now, Daniel said, tapping her nose. That's not true. She giggled. After dropping Lily at school, Daniel headed to the warehouse. It was mindless work. Loading and unloading pallets, organizing inventory. His body did the work while his mind wandered. Catherine's words kept coming back to him. The world needs your music, but the world also needed rent money, grocery money, money for doctor's appointments and school supplies, and a million other things that didn't care about artistic dreams. During his lunch break, Daniel sat in his car and pulled out his phone. He stared at Catherine's card for a long time. Finally, he dialed the number. It rang 3 times before she answered. This is Catherine Webb. Professor Webb, this is Daniel Rodriguez. From last night. Daniel! Her voice brightened immediately. I'm so glad you called. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not sure why I am, Daniel admitted. I meant what I said. That part of my life is over, is it? Because what I saw last night suggested otherwise. Professor Webb, Catherine, please. Catherine, Daniel corrected. I appreciate whatever you're trying to do, but I'm not that person anymore. I have responsibilities, a daughter to raise, bills to pay. I can't just, what if I told you I might have a position at the conservatory? Catherine interrupted. A real position, teaching composition to advanced students, with a salary and benefits. Daniel's heart jumped, then immediately sank. I don't have the credentials for that. I never graduated. You have something better than credentials. You have genuine talent and real-world experience. The kind of things we can't teach in a classroom. She paused. And before you say no, I should mention that the position comes with free tuition for faculty children. Your daughter could study at our preparatory academy. Daniel closed his eyes. Lily loved piano. Really loved it. She had the same gift he'd had at her age, maybe better. The thought of her having opportunities he'd lost made his chest tight. I need to think about it, he said. Of course. But Daniel? Don't think too long. The position needs to be filled by next semester. After hanging up, Daniel sat in his car staring at nothing. Around him, other warehouse workers ate their lunches, scrolled through their phones, chatted with coworkers. Normal people living normal lives. Maybe normal wasn't so bad. Normal was safe. Predictable. But normal also meant watching Lily practice on a cheap keyboard instead of a real piano. It meant coming home exhausted every night with nothing left to give. It meant burying the part of himself that made him feel alive. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Vincent Park. I got your number from the catering company. I hope that's okay. I wanted to apologize properly for last night. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I'd like to talk to you about something. Daniel frowned. What could Vincent possibly want to talk about? More guilt money? Some kind of pity project? He should ignore it. Delete the message and forget about the whole thing. Instead, he found himself typing back. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., Joe's Coffee on 5th Street. Vincent's reply came instantly. I'll be there. Thank you. Daniel put his phone away and headed back into the warehouse. Whatever happened next, at least life wasn't boring anymore. Joe's Coffee was the kind of place that hadn't changed in 30 years. Vinyl booths with duct tape patches, a counter with wobbly stools, and coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead. Daniel liked it because it was honest. No pretense. No $15 lattes with unpronounceable names. He arrived 10 minutes early and took a booth in the back. The morning rush had died down, leaving just a few regulars reading newspapers and nursing their coffee. The waitress, Rita, knew him by name. Regular, she asked, pot already in hand. Please. She poured and left him alone. That was another thing he liked about this place. Nobody bothered you. Daniel wrapped his hands around the mug, feeling the warmth seep into his damaged left hand. The throbbing from 2 nights ago had settled into a dull ache. Manageable. At 10 sharp, Vincent walked through the door. He looked different without the expensive suit. Just jeans and a sweater. Almost normal. His eyes scanned the room until he spotted Daniel. Then he walked over with visible uncertainty. Thanks for meeting me, Vincent said. Sliding into the opposite booth, Daniel nodded but didn't speak. Rita appeared with her pot. Coffee? Yes, thank you, Vincent said. After she left, an awkward silence settled between them. Vincent added cream to his coffee, stirred it, then seemed to gather his courage. "I've been thinking about that night," he began. "About what I said to you, how I treated you. You already apologized with your tip," Daniel said flatly. "We're good." "No, we're not," Vincent looked him in the eye. "Money doesn't fix what I did. I humiliated you in front of 50 people because I assumed I knew who you were based on how you looked. That was wrong." Daniel took a sip of his coffee and waited. There had to be more. "After you left, I couldn't stop thinking about it," Vincent continued. "So I looked you up. There's not much online, but I found some things. Reviews of your early compositions, a few recordings from student performances, an article about promising young composers from 15 years ago." He paused. "You were the real deal." "Were," Daniel emphasized. "Past tense. That's what I wanted to talk to you about." Vincent leaned forward. "I have connections in the music industry, record labels, producers, publishers, people who could help you get your music out there. I could make some calls, set up meetings." "No." Daniel's voice was firm. Vincent blinked. "You didn't let me finish. I don't need to. I know where this is going. Rich guy feels bad about being a jerk, decides to play fairy godmother to make himself feel better. Thanks, but no thanks." "That's not what this is," Vincent protested, "isn't it?" Daniel leaned back in the booth. "You want to help me because it makes you feel good about yourself. Because then you can tell people at your next party about how you discovered this struggling veteran and changed his life. I'm not interested in being your redemption project." Vincent's face reddened, but to his credit, he didn't lash out. Instead, he sat back and was quiet for a moment. "You're right," he finally said. "Part of it is about me feeling better. I'm not going to lie about that. But here's the thing, does it matter? If my guilt can actually help you, does it matter why I'm offering?" "It matters to me," Daniel said. "Why?" "Because of pride." Vincent's frustration was showing now. "You've got a gift that most people would kill for, and you're wasting it loading boxes in a warehouse because you're too proud to accept help?" "You don't know anything about my life," Daniel said, his voice low and dangerous. "Then tell me. Explain it to me." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, debating whether to walk out. But something in Vincent's face stopped him. Real curiosity, not pity, not condescension, just someone genuinely trying to understand. "When I came back from Iraq," Daniel began slowly, "I was a mess, physically, mentally, emotionally. My hand was destroyed. My wife was sick. We had medical bills piling up that would make your head spin. I couldn't perform anymore. Couldn't do studio work. Any connections I had in the music world were 3 years old and gone cold." He took another sip of coffee. "So I did what I had to do. Got a job, then another job, then another. And you know what? It worked. We survived. But my wife didn't. Cancer took her when Lily was 3. His voice caught slightly. "After that, it was just me and my daughter. Everything I do is for her. Every shift I work, every dollar I save. She's the only thing that matters." Vincent was quiet, absorbing this. "The music industry doesn't care about any of that," Daniel continued. "They want someone they can package and sell. Someone young and marketable without baggage. I'm 38 with a disabled hand and a kid to raise. I'm nobody's idea of a good investment. But your music, my music lives in my head and on scraps of paper I write during lunch breaks." "That's enough. It has to be enough." Vincent shook his head. "I hear what you're saying, but I think you're wrong. Professor Webb called me yesterday." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You talked to Catherine?" "She called me, actually. Wanted to know if I knew how to reach you. We talked for a while." Vincent smiled slightly. "She's pretty intimidating when she wants to be. Told me in no uncertain terms that if I was planning some kind of charity stunt, she'd make sure I regretted it." Despite himself, Daniel almost smiled. "That sounded like Catherine. She also told me about the position at the conservatory." Vincent continued. "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know yet. Why not? It sounds perfect. Teaching, composing, benefits for your daughter." "Because it's scary," Daniel admitted. "I've spent 15 years building a life that's stable, predictable, safe. Taking that job means risking all of that. What if I'm not good enough anymore? What if I can't do it with my hand the way it is? What if I let everyone down? What if you don't?" Vincent countered. "What if you're exactly what those students need? Someone who's been through hell and still creates beauty?" Daniel was quiet. "Look," Vincent said, "I know I'm the last person who should be giving you advice, and I know you don't trust me. But can I tell you something about myself? Daniel gestured for him to continue. I built my company from nothing, started in my parents' garage with an idea and a laptop. Everyone told me it would fail. My dad wanted me to go to law school. Be practical. Have security. Vincent smiled ruefully. I almost listened. Almost took the safe path. And if I had, I'd be miserable right now. Maybe successful by some measures, but miserable. That's different, Daniel said. You didn't have a kid depending on you. No, but I had student loans that would choke a horse and parents who'd mortgage their house to help me through college. The stakes felt pretty high at the time. Vincent leaned forward again. I'm not saying quit everything tomorrow and become a starving artist. I'm saying maybe there's a middle path. Take the teaching job, see where it leads. And if you want, let me make a few quiet introductions. No pressure, no expectations. Just options. Why do you even care? Daniel asked. Vincent thought about that for a moment. Honestly, because watching you play that piano was the most real thing I've experienced in years. Everything in my life is calculated. Every relationship is a transaction. Every interaction has an angle. But what you did that night, that was pure. It reminded me why I fell in love with technology in the first place. Not for the money or status, but because creating something new felt like magic. He met Daniel's eyes. I'm not trying to fix you or save you. I just don't want to live in a world where talent like yours disappears because the system is too broken to recognize it. Daniel stared into his coffee cup. Everything Vincent was saying made sense. But sense and safety were two different things. I need time to think, Daniel said finally. Fair enough. Vincent pulled out his phone. I'm going to give you my personal number. Not my assistant's line, mine. If you decide you want to talk more, call me. If you don't, that's fine too. Either way, I hope you take the teaching job. The world needs more people who actually care about what they're doing. They finished their coffee making small talk about less heavy subjects. When the check came, they split it down the middle. It felt important somehow. Equal ground. As they stood to leave, Vincent extended his hand. Daniel looked at it for a moment, then shook it. For what it's worth, Vincent said, I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not just for the other night, but for every time I've judged someone without knowing their story. Daniel nodded. We all do it sometimes. Maybe you'll do better going forward. I'll try. Walking back to his car, Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not a decision exactly, but an opening. A possibility he hadn't allowed himself to consider. Maybe, just maybe, safe wasn't the only option anymore. 3 weeks later, Daniel stood outside the Riverside Conservatory for the first time in 15 years. The building looked the same. Red brick, tall windows, the sound of music drifting from practice rooms. But everything felt different now. He'd called Catherine the day after meeting with Vincent. The conversation had been shorter than he expected. She didn't push or convince. Just told him when to come in for an interview and said she looked forward to seeing him. The interview had been more of a conversation. Catherine introduced him to the department chair, a friendly man named Dr. Chen who spent more time asking about Daniel's compositions than his credentials. They wanted to know how he wrote music now, how he adapted to his injury, what he'd learned from living outside the academic world. 2 weeks later, Catherine called with an offer. The salary wasn't huge, but it was more than he made working 3 jobs. And the benefits, health insurance, retirement, tuition for Lily, those changed everything. He'd given notice at all 3 jobs. His warehouse supervisor had been disappointed but understanding. The catering manager had hugged him. Mrs. Chen from next door had cried happy tears when he told her. Now here he was, first day of the spring semester, about to teach his first class. Daniel checked his watch. 10 minutes until class started. He climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. Room 304, his room, his classroom. Inside, 12 students sat waiting, chatting quietly among themselves. They looked so young. Most were probably 18, 19. The same age he'd been when his life had taken its sharp turn. They fell silent when he entered. Morning, Daniel said, setting his worn leather bag on the desk. I'm Daniel Rodriguez. Welcome to Advanced Composition. He looked around at their faces, some curious, some skeptical. One kid in the back looked half asleep. I'm going to be honest with you, Daniel continued. I'm not your typical professor. I didn't finish my degree. I spent the last 15 years working regular jobs and raising my daughter. Some of you might wonder what I'm doing here. A few students shifted in their seats. The truth is, I'm still figuring that out myself, he admitted. But here's what I do know. Music isn't just something you study in a classroom. It's something you live. It's in the rhythm of a factory floor, the silence of a hospital waiting room, the sound of your kid laughing. All of it matters. All of it can become music if you learn to listen. He picked up a piece of chalk and wrote on the board, "Composition isn't about perfection. It's about truth. This semester we're going to focus on finding your truth," he said. "Not copying what's been done before. Not writing what you think I want to hear. Your actual truth. The stuff that scares you. The stuff that makes you vulnerable. That's where the real music lives." A girl in the front row raised her hand. "But what about technique? Structure? Don't those things matter?" "Of course they matter," Daniel said. "You need to know the rules before you can break them effectively." But too many composers get so caught up in rules that they forget why they started making music in the first place. He paused. "How many of you actually love what you're writing?" A few hands went up hesitantly. "How many of you are writing what you think you're supposed to write?" More hands this time, along with some embarrassed laughter. "That's what I thought," Daniel said with a slight smile. "Don't worry. We're going to fix that." The class flew by. Daniel had them do an exercise. Write a melody based on a memory that still hurts. No judgment, no critique, just creation. The room filled with the sound of pencils scratching, phones recording hummed tunes, a few students at the piano working through ideas. When the period ended, several students lingered to ask questions. The sleepy kid from the back turned out to be named Tyler, and he wanted to know more about writing music with physical limitations. "I've got arthritis," Tyler explained, flexing his fingers. "Early onset. Some days I can barely play. I thought maybe I should give up composing." Daniel showed him the scars on his left hand. "See these? Nerve damage. I'll never play like I used to. But I learned to compose differently. I can show you some techniques if you're interested." Tyler's face lit up. "That would be amazing." After the students left, Daniel sat alone in the classroom for a moment. His heart was racing, but in a good way. He'd forgotten what this felt like. Teaching, sharing, connecting with people through music. Catherine appeared in the doorway. "How'd it go?" "Better than expected," Daniel admitted. "They actually seemed interested." "Of course they were." "You're the real deal," she smiled. "There's someone here to see you, by the way." "In the recital hall?" Daniel followed her down the hallway, curious. When he entered the recital hall, he found Lily sitting at the grand piano on stage, running through scales with surprising confidence. A young woman stood beside her, offering gentle corrections. "Daddy!" Lily jumped up when she saw him and ran over. "Miss Patterson says I can join the preparatory program. I get to take lessons twice a week." Daniel looked at Catherine, who smiled. "Part of the benefits package. I thought you might want to see where she'll be studying." The young woman, Miss Patterson, came over and shook Daniel's hand. "Your daughter is very talented. She tells me you've been teaching her." "Just the basics," Daniel said. "Well, you've done a wonderful job. She's got great fundamentals and real musical instinct." Lily was practically bouncing. "Can I play something for you?" "I've been practicing really hard." "Of course, sweetie." They sat in the audience seats while Lily returned to the piano. She started playing a piece Daniel had written for her, a simple melody they'd been working on together. But she'd added her own variations, her own interpretation. It wasn't technically perfect, but it was heartfelt and genuine. When she finished, she looked at him expectantly. "That was beautiful," Daniel said, his voice thick. "When did you add those variations?" "Last week. I hope that's okay. I just thought it needed something there. More than okay. It's perfect." After Lily's lesson was scheduled and Miss Patterson left, Daniel and Lily walked through the conservatory together. She wanted to see everything, the practice rooms, the concert hall, the music library. "I can't believe I get to come here," Lily said, wonder in her voice. "It's like a castle made of music." Daniel laughed. "That's a pretty good description. Are you happy here, Dad?" she asked suddenly. He stopped and looked at her. Really looked at her. When had she gotten so perceptive? "Yeah, I think I am," he said honestly. "It's scary starting something new. But good scary. Like a roller coaster? Exactly like that." That evening, Daniel's phone buzzed as he was making dinner. A text from Vincent. "Hey, hope the first day went well. No pressure, but there's someone I want you to meet next week. A friend who runs an independent music label. Just coffee. You interested?" Daniel stared at the message for a moment. A month ago, he would have said no immediately. Too risky, too uncertain. But something had changed. Taking this teaching job had reminded him that calculated risks sometimes pay off. He typed back, "Sure, send me the details." Vincent's reply came quickly. "Great, also I'm hosting another event next month. Much smaller this time. Dinner party. Would love for you and Lily to come. As guests, not staff." Daniel smiled at that. "We'll be there." Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Daniel sat at the small keyboard in his bedroom. His left hand ached from the day's activity, but it was manageable. He placed his hands on the keys and began to play, letting a new melody form. It started soft and uncertain like most new things. But as he played, it grew stronger, more confident. It spoke of second chances and the courage to try again, of the beauty that comes after hardship, of a father and daughter finding their way forward together. He played until midnight, then carefully wrote down the notation before he forgot it. At the top of the page, he wrote, "New beginnings." Across town, Vincent sat in his study looking at the business card Catherine had given him. On it was information about the conservatory's donor program. He picked up his phone and drafted an email about establishing a scholarship fund for students from non-traditional backgrounds. And in her office at the conservatory, Catherine reviewed the semester schedule, pleased to see Daniel's classes were already filling up. Students had heard about the new professor, who actually understood what it meant to struggle. Word was spreading. The next morning, Daniel woke early and made breakfast for Lily. As she ate her cereal, practicing her spelling words, he realized something had shifted in him. The fear was still there, it probably always would be. But it didn't control him anymore, Dad, Lily said between bites. "Can I tell you something?" "Always. I'm really proud of you." For being brave, Daniel's throat tightened. "I'm proud of you too, kiddo. Every single day." She grinned and went back to her cereal. Just like that. Kids had a way of making profound moments simple. As Daniel drove them both to their new beginning, Lily to her school, him to the conservatory, he thought about how one humiliating moment had somehow led to this, to hope, to possibility, to a future he'd stopped letting himself imagine. Life was funny that way. Sometimes the worst moments broke you open just enough to let the light back in. He pulled into the conservatory parking lot, ready for day 2, ready for whatever came next, because he wasn't alone anymore. He had Catherine's faith, Vincent's respect, Lily's love, and his own music calling him forward. And this time he was finally ready to answer.